At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, a man crying so hard I could barely understand him. He said 3 words that froze me. "Your wife did this." When the phone screamed at 2:17 a.m., a stranger's tear-choked voice ripped open a wound I thought had already festered. "Your wife, Anya," he choked out. "She's not who either of us thought she was." I shot upright in the guest bed, the one I've been sleeping in for 3 brutal weeks. 3 weeks ago, my hands would have been shaking. I would have been sobbing into the receiver. But those 21 days, watching my 12-year marriage to Anya crumble, watching her contempt for me grow, had turned me into something colder, harder. I wasn't just a victim anymore. "Talk," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. His name was Leo Moretti, 42, an orthopedic surgeon and recently divorced. He'd met Anya 7 months ago at a medical conference in Denver. She'd spun him a tragic tale. I was an abusive monster. Our marriage was dead, but I controlled all the money, leaving her trapped. She was supposedly gathering evidence for a lawyer, just needed time to build her case safely. I listened, a chill settling in my bones. He detailed their affair with a detached, almost clinical tone. The secret hotel rooms, the weekend getaways she'd blamed on visiting her sister in Phoenix. And the burner phone, the one he didn't know, I'd already found in her gym bag 2 weeks ago. I fell for it completely, Leo admitted, his voice hollow. Every word. I wanted to save her. Then he dropped the bomb. 3 days ago, my father died. Left me everything, $2.4 million after taxes. I told Anya yesterday morning. By yesterday afternoon, she convinced me to put $800,000 into a temporary trust she'd conveniently set up. It was supposedly to shield the money from his ex-wife's alimony lawyers. She had all the official-looking papers, a notary. He'd signed everything. I remember walking to the window, the phone pressed to my ear, our bedroom door closed down the hall. Anya was presumably sleeping soundly in what used to be our bed. This morning, Leo continued, his voice cracking, I casually mentioned it to my estate attorney. He went white, had me forward everything. Call me back an hour later. The trust, it doesn't exist. The notary seal is fake. The account it's wired to, he choked on the words, it's in the Cayman Islands. The beneficial owner is hidden behind 3 shell companies, but my attorney's investigator traced it back. Every company leads to corporations established by someone named Anya Hartwell. Her maiden name. Leo told me he'd filed a police report, federal wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, but the money was already gone, transferred to Panama. Recovery, his attorney said, was nearly impossible. And Anya? Her phone was disconnected. Her email bounced. It's like she never existed, he despaired. I just walked to my closet, pulling out the folder I'd been secretly building since I found that burner phone. Screenshots of texts she deleted, credit card statements from hotels she swore she'd never been to, receipts from restaurants I'd never seen. Leo, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, do you know anything about her life before we met? He recounted the story she'd told him. From Seattle, pharmaceutical sales, met at a conference 13 years ago. She's from Boise. I corrected him, the words tasting like ash. Never worked in pharmaceutical sales a day in her life. She was a paralegal at a small firm specializing in estate planning. We met at a charity fundraiser my company sponsored. The pieces started clicking into place with a sickening certainty. I heard Leo's ragged breathing on the other end, processing it all. My company? We do wealth management. High net worth clients. Estate planning, trust administration, inheritance structuring. When Anya and I married, I was managing $100 million in client assets. Now it's over $400 million. She'd had a front row seat for 12 years, watching exactly how wealthy people move money, hide assets, and protect their inheritances. The silence stretched, heavy with implications. Then Leo asked, you think she's done this before? I said, a cold resolve settling over me. We need to find out. The next day, I called in sick to Anya, claiming urgent client meetings. Instead, I drove to a private investigation firm specializing in financial crimes. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a former FBI forensic accountant who owned the firm, listened, her fingers steepled, her expression unreadable. "The timeline bothers me," Evelyn said, her gaze piercing. "She doesn't leave you until after Leo's father dies." That's incredibly specific. How would she know about his inheritance? I've been gnawing on that exact question. The conference they met at was the American College of Surgeons Symposium 7 months ago. Evelyn explained that these aren't random events. Attendee lists are published in advance for networking. Anya would have known exactly who was going to be there. She pulled up her laptop, her fingers flying. Orthopedic surgeons at that particular conference tend to fit a certain profile: established, successful, often with parents in their 70s or 80s who possess significant family wealth. Leo's father, she confirmed, was 81. Public records showed he owned 3 surgical centers and commercial real estate in Colorado. "That's not hard to find," Evelyn observed. "She hunted him," I stated, the realization a bitter taste in my mouth. "Possibly," Evelyn countered, "but what we need to establish is a pattern. If she's done this before, there will be traces, bank accounts, LLCs, property purchases under shell companies. And most importantly," she leaned forward, her eyes intense, "other victims." She quoted me $15,000 for a full forensic investigation, $5,000 upfront. I liquidated an old investment account my own father had left me, money Anya never knew existed, kept specifically for an emergency like this. I wrote the check. "One more thing," Evelyn cautioned as I stood to leave. "Don't tell her. Don't change your routine. If she's sophisticated enough to set up offshore accounts and shell companies, she's sophisticated enough to have contingency plans. We need her to believe she's safe." That evening, I walked into our kitchen, Anya smiling at me as she made dinner, a scene I'd witnessed 1,000 times. But that smile, which once warmed my soul, now made my skin crawl. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice light. "Fine. I lied, lots of meetings." "Yours?" She shrugged. "Oh, boring errands. But I'm thinking about that yoga teacher training I mentioned, the intensive program in Santa Fe. 6 weeks. Starts next month. 6 weeks. That was plenty of time to vanish with Leo's money and whatever else she'd stashed away." "Sounds great," I said, forcing a smile. "You should definitely do it." Her smile widened. She thought she'd won. For days later, Evelyn called. "You need to come to my office. I'm not discussing this over the phone." The conference room table was a war zone of documents, financial statements, corporate registrations, property records, and stacks of photographs. Driver's licenses. Professional headshots of men I'd never seen before. "Your wife's real name is Anya Hartwell," Evelyn began, her voice calm but firm. "Age 36, born in Boise, Idaho. Worked as a paralegal for Whitman and Associates, an estate planning firm, from 22 to 25. Fired for accessing client files without authorization. No charges were filed. The firm kept it quiet." She slid a document across the table. At 26, she married a man named Marcus Thorne, a real estate developer in Portland. Married for 14 months. During that time, Marcus's mother died, leaving him a construction company worth about $3 million. 6 months after the inheritance, Anya filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The settlement gave her $400,000. Marcus, devastated, signed without contesting. "That's not illegal." I pointed out, my throat tight. "No," Evelyn agreed. But 3 months after the divorce, Marcus discovered $200,000 missing from his business accounts, transfers made with forged authorization during the marriage. He reported it, but by then, Anya was gone. No forwarding address. Case went cold. My chest felt like it was tightening in a vice. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Evelyn nodded slowly. "Marriage number 2. Age 29. David Rossi, an emergency room physician in Sacramento. Married 32 months. His father died 18 months in, leaving him a $700,000 inheritance. Anya convinced David to invest $400,000 in a medical equipment startup she'd researched. The company folded within 6 months, a total loss. She filed for divorce shortly after, blaming his financial irresponsibility. Got a settlement, disappeared. David later discovered the startup was registered to a shell company owned by a Cayman Islands trust. Beneficial owner unknown. She kept sliding documents. Each one a different man. Each one married to Anya under slightly different pretenses. Each one inherited money. Each one lost some or all of it through fabricated schemes, failed investments, evaporating business opportunities, trusts that were never real. For marriages before you, Evelyn stated, her voice cutting through the heavy air. You're number 5. Leo Moretti was meant to be number 6. My stomach lurched. She was going to leave me after securing his money, then marry him and wait for the next inheritance. I stared at the faces in the photos. Marcus, David, Thomas, Anthony. Men who had loved her, trusted her. Men who were just marks. The pattern is consistent, Evelyn continued. She targets men in their 30s and 40s with aging, wealthy parents. Builds a relationship, establishes trust, waits for the inheritance, then extracts as much as possible through divorce settlements or outright fraud. Sometimes both. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the fake documents, it was all so incredibly sophisticated. She's made approximately $4.2 million over 14 years. Tax-free, untraceable. Or was untraceable. Evelyn's smile was sharp, almost predatory herself. I found the pattern. Money moved through multiple jurisdictions, but it always consolidates eventually. There's a primary account in Singapore, secondary accounts in Panama and the Cayman Islands, property held through trusts in Belize. She'd been building this nest egg for over a decade. And here's the thing about methodical criminals, Evelyn added, turning her laptop toward me. They keep records, spreadsheets, documentation. They're not just criminals, they're planners. Bank statements, transaction histories, names, dates, it was all there. Leo's $800,000 had posted to the Cayman account 4 days ago. It was still there because she was waiting. These accounts have scheduled transfer protocols to avoid triggering automated fraud detection, Evelyn explained. The money moves to Singapore in 3 days. Once it's there, recovery becomes nearly impossible. I looked at the evidence, spread out like a morbid roadmap of her life. Years of calculated predation. Men whose lives she'd entered like a parasite, extracting resources and moving on. What do I do? I asked, my voice hoarse. Evelyn closed her laptop with a decisive snap. You call Leo Moretti. You call a federal prosecutor. And you make damn sure Anya doesn't get on a plane to Santa Fe or anywhere else in the next 72 hours. Leo met me at a coffee shop, a neutral zone. He looked like hell, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same jacket he'd probably slept in for days. He just stared at me. I don't know why I'm here, he mumbled. I destroyed your marriage. Why would you help me? Because you destroyed my marriage, Leo. I countered, my voice steady. You were just the tool she used. And you're not her first victim, Leo. You're not even her 6th. I laid out all the evidence Evelyn had uncovered. He went through the documents in silence, his jaw tightening with each page. When he reached the photos of the other men, his hands started to tremble. She told me she loved me, he whispered, his voice cracking. She told all of us something we needed to hear, I replied. I needed someone who understood the pressure of managing wealth. You needed someone who made you feel like a hero, saving her from an abusive marriage. Marcus needed someone who appreciated his ambition. David needed someone who admired his dedication to medicine. She's a specialist. She studies her target and becomes exactly what they're looking for. Leo set the papers down, his eyes glazed with a terrible understanding. What happens now? Now, I said, we make sure she faces consequences. I'd already contacted a federal prosecutor through my attorney. Wire fraud across state lines and international borders. Identity theft, forgery, money laundering. The charges were piling up. But prosecution meant evidence, witnesses, and, crucially, catching her before she vanished. Evelyn brought in Agent Miller, a former Secret Service agent, whose sole job was to maintain surveillance on Anya until we could coordinate the arrest. Miller was good. Anya never knew she was being followed. Gym, grocery store, lunch with friends who had no clue what she really was. But Miller also noticed something else. She's making preparations, he reported to me on day 2. New passport photos at CVS. A large envelope dropped at UPS. $8,000 withdrawn in cash from an ATM. Structured transactions to avoid reporting thresholds. She's planning to run. How long do we have? I asked, my heart pounding. Days? Maybe a week at most. I called the prosecutor again. She listened, reviewed Evelyn's compiled evidence, and made a decision. We move tomorrow, she said. I'm coordinating with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We'll execute a search warrant on your home and take her into custody. I'll need you out of the house by 6 a.m. That night, I lay in the guest bed, listening to Anya moving around the house. Packing, planning her yoga retreat in Santa Fe, which, in reality, was her escape to some country with no extradition treaty. She thought she'd gotten away with it again. She thought I was still the same trusting fool she'd married 12 years ago. The rage I'd carried for 3 weeks had solidified into something cold, sharp. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. For Leo, for Marcus, for David, for every man whose life she'd treated as a resource to be harvested. At 5:30 a.m., I slipped out through the garage before she woke up and drove to Leo's hotel. We sat in my car, waiting. The call came at 8:43 a.m. She's in custody, the prosecutor confirmed. They found everything. A safe in her closet with 3 passports under different names. Her laptop with encrypted files. Our forensic team was already cracking them. Flash drives with scanned documents going back 14 years. She kept trophies, photos of every mark, records of every single score. She simply couldn't help herself. Leo's face crumpled. He buried his head in his hands. I just gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely audible. She'll be arraigned this afternoon, the prosecutor explained. Federal magistrate. Given the flight risk, I'm requesting remand without bail. You'll both need to come in for formal statements. Then she added, and Mr. Moretti, the forensic accountant, believes she hasn't moved your money to Singapore yet. There's a chance we can freeze the accounts and recover it. Leo looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Really? No promises, she cautioned, but we're already working with Interpol and international banking authorities. She made one mistake. She got greedy. Took too much from you, too fast. That created a trail we could follow before she had time to obscure it. The arraignment was held in a federal courthouse downtown. Leo and I sat in the gallery, Evelyn and my attorney beside us. When they brought Anya in, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, she looked small, diminished. For 12 years, she'd been the magnetic, beautiful, confident center of my world. Now, she just looked like what she was, a con artist who'd finally run out of road. Her eyes swept the courtroom, then locked onto mine. For a split second, something flickered in her expression. Surprise, perhaps? That I was there? That I'd figured it out? That the prey had become the predator? Then her face went blank. The mask she'd worn for all of us was gone. What remained was utterly empty. The prosecutor laid out the charges: 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 of money laundering, 8 of identity theft, 3 of forgery. Each count carried years of federal prison time. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses, reviewed the case summary without a hint of emotion. Miss Hartwell, she said, her voice clear, you are charged with operating a sophisticated fraud scheme spanning multiple states and international jurisdictions over a period of 14 years. The government has presented evidence of patterned criminal behavior targeting multiple victims for financial exploitation. How do you plead? Anya's attorney, a public defender assigned that very morning because she couldn't access her stolen fund for bail, stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. The prosecutor rose. Your Honor, the defendant poses an extreme flight risk. She was apprehended during active preparations to flee this jurisdiction. We recovered 3 passports under different identities, evidence of structured cash withdrawals to avoid reporting requirements, and travel documents indicating intent to leave the country within 48 hours. She has no legitimate ties to this community. Her entire life is predicated on fraud and deception. We request remand without bail. The judge looked directly at Anya. Does defense counsel wish to respond? The public defender looked utterly exhausted. Your Honor, Miss Hartwell has no prior criminal record. She has no prior criminal record, the judge interrupted, her voice gaining an edge, because she successfully evaded detection for over a decade. I've reviewed the evidence summary. This is not a case of a single bad decision. This is systematic, premeditated predation. The defendant is remanded without bail pending trial. We'll set a preliminary hearing for 2 weeks from today. The gavel came down with a resounding thud. They led Anya away. She didn't look back. Leo and I walked out of the courthouse into the cold November sunlight. Neither of us spoke for a long time, the silence punctuated only by the distant city sounds. Finally, Leo turned to me, his voice rough. Thank you for believing me. When I called you at 2 a.m., you could have hung up. You could have told me to go to hell. Instead, you listened. You helped me. After what I did to your marriage. You didn't do anything to my marriage, Leo. I interrupted gently. My marriage ended 12 years ago. I just didn't know it yet. She married me for access to estate planning knowledge and client connections. She married you for an inheritance. We were both just targets. Leo nodded slowly, the grim truth settling. What happens to you now? Divorce, I said, staring at the courthouse steps. Asset recovery. Rebuilding. My attorney was already filing an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets and void any transactions from past year. Between her criminal charges and the undeniable evidence of fraud during our marriage, I should be able to walk away with everything I came in with. And her. I thought about the woman in that orange jumpsuit. The woman who'd slept beside me for 12 years while meticulously plotting her next con. The woman who'd kissed me goodbye every morning, all while secretly maintaining encrypted files documenting her crimes. 20 years federal prison, I said, a dark satisfaction blooming in my chest. Maybe more. The prosecutor is building cases for every victim. Marcus, David, Thomas, Anthony, all of them are cooperating. Every fraud charge adds time. The judge made it clear she sees Anya as a serial predator, not a one-time offender. She's never getting out. We reached our cars. Leo extended his hand, and I shook it firmly. If you ever need anything, he said. Same, I replied. He drove away. I stood there, in the parking lot, looking up at the courthouse. Somewhere inside, Anya was being processed into the federal detention system. No more luxury hotels. No more offshore accounts. No more hunting for wealthy men with dying parents. Just a cell. And time to think about what she'd done. I got in my car and drove home. The house felt different now. Cleaner, somehow, despite the forensic team's intrusion. They'd taken her laptop, her files, her fake passports, every physical trace of the lies she'd built. I walked to the bedroom. Our bedroom, stripped the sheets, and threw them straight into the trash. I opened the windows wide, letting the cold November air pour through, a cleansing breeze. I started making a list of everything that needed to change. New locks, new bank accounts, new credit monitoring, maybe even new furniture for the rooms that still smelled of her perfume. But first, I needed to sleep. Real sleep. Not the fitful, anxious sleep of the guest room. Not the sleep of someone being hunted by their own spouse. The sleep of someone who had finally survived. The trial finally happened 7 months later. The prosecution brought a mountain of evidence. 847 pieces. Bank records, forged documents, testimony from all 6 victims, the forensic analysis of Anya's encrypted files. Her attorney barely mounted a defense. What defense was there? The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 23 years in federal prison. No parole. Restitution was ordered for all victims for $0.2 million plus interest and penalties. The money we could recover from the frozen accounts would be distributed proportionally. Leo got back $600,000 of his $800,000. I recovered the $300,000 she'd siphoned from our joint accounts over the years. The others got smaller amounts, whatever could be traced and recovered. By then, it wasn't really about the money. It was about standing in that courtroom and watching her finally face the consequences of treating human beings as mere resources to be harvested. After the sentencing, the 6 of us, Marcus, David, Thomas, Anthony, Leo, and me stood outside the courthouse. We'd all given victim impact statements. We'd all looked her in the eye and told her what she'd stolen from us. Not just money, but trust, years of our lives, the very ability to believe and love without suspicion. Does this feel like closure? Anthony, the oldest at 51, her second husband, asked. She'd taken $800,000 from him through a fake investment scheme. No, I said honestly, but it feels like justice. We exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch, though I doubted we would. We were connected by trauma, not friendship. Still, it mattered that we'd all been there, that we'd faced her together. I divorced Anya in absentia. She didn't contest it. My attorney said she was surprisingly cooperative about signing the papers from prison, probably hoping it would look good for an appeals process that would never succeed. A year after the trial, I sold the house. Too many ghosts, too many memories of a marriage that was never real. I bought a smaller place across town, and eventually I started dating Lena, a kindergarten teacher I met through friends. She had no idea who I was or what I'd been through until our fourth date, when I finally told her everything. She listened, without judgment. Then she simply said, "That must have been incredibly painful. I'm so sorry you went through that. No, how could you not see it? No, there must have been signs. Just compassion for the pain, and an acknowledgement that evil sometimes wears a beautiful face." 2 years after the trial, Leo called me. "I'm getting married," he said, his voice full of genuine happiness. "For real this time. Someone I've known for 10 years. Someone who was there before the money, before everything. I wanted you to know." "Congratulations," I said, and I truly meant it. "Will you come to the wedding?" he asked. I thought about it. About standing at the wedding of a man who'd unknowingly been part of destroying my marriage, even if he was also a victim. About whether I could truly separate the person from the circumstances. "Yeah," I said, "I'll be there." And I was. I watched Leo marry a woman who loved him for reasons that had nothing to do with his inheritance or his profession. I watched him smile without the haunted look he'd had in that coffee shop 2 years earlier. I watched him begin again. We all begin again, I thought. Or we try to. I still think about Anya sometimes. About the woman I thought I'd married versus the predator who'd marked me as a target before we'd even had our first conversation. About whether any of it had been real. The laughter, the quiet moments, the life we'd built that was really just set dressing for a con. My therapist says it doesn't matter. That the life I experienced was real to me, even if it was manufactured by her. That I'm allowed to mourn what I thought I had, even while accepting it was a lie. I'm still working on that part. But I'm also rebuilding. Lena and I have been together for 18 months now. We talk about moving in together, about building something real that starts with honesty instead of deception. And sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night, I think about that 2 a.m. phone call from Leo, about how close Anya came to getting away with it. How if Leo's father hadn't died exactly when he did, if Leo hadn't mentioned that trust to his estate attorney, if any single variable had been different, she'd still be out there, still hunting. But she isn't out there. She's in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, serving 23 years for crimes against 6 men who made the mistake of loving her. That has to be enough. It has to be.